Okay. Next speaker, Nick Desai, is the CEO of Heal. And when we first talked to him, he really talked about this idea of a lot of fundraising now, or a lot of companies are creating hype and a bunch of bullshit and fluff. And it's actually really just around results and creating value. And so I think he's done 2 or 3 other startups successfully, but now with Heal, it's basically doctors on demand. And I just really liked that he's kind of a straight shooter. So Nick, come on down. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. All right.
Do you have a clicker?
I don't have slides, so I'm okay. Hey, everybody. How are you? I know I'm the last speaker before the VC panel, and I know that's kind of the highlight of shows like this. So I'll try to keep it as interesting and short and informative as possible. So you guys have been sitting here for a while, so let's start with a show of hands. How many of you are currently trying to get your startup funded? A lot of people. Good. That's good news. And how many of you have heard the term smart money versus dumb money? Right? Okay, good. You've heard this term. And how many of you have ever read a book about, or article, or TechCrunch, or Pando Daily about some company that gets funded, and you read about the founder, and you're like, but previously he was this at PayPal, and previously he was that guy, and his lawyer knew this guy, and he was the partner of the VC firm, and he were golfing buddies, and you're like, and you think there, and you read these things, and you think to yourself, but I don't know these guys, and I didn't work at PayPal, so how is this going to work for me? Has that happened to you? Okay, so that's kind of what I'm here to talk about. I'm based in Los Angeles, right, which is a 45-minute Southwest Airlines flight away from here. But if you heard the Silicon Valley VCs that are on Menlo Park and Sand Hill Road talk about it, you would think it was Mars, because it's like, oh my God, you're in LA, we can't fund you because you're in LA, because that's not Silicon Valley, right? And I mention that because one of the things that is important to know in the post-bubble economy, or the pre-bubble economy, or during a bubble, is a few different things, and those are the things I'm here to talk about. The first is, how do we get these bubbles, right? How do bubbles come and how do bubbles go? I'm no expert on economics, but one of the things that is fairly obvious is between the middle of 2009, about June 2009, and the middle of last year, the stock market had one of its greatest run-ups in the history, the Dow Jones, and the stock market had one of its greatest run-ups in the history of stock markets in the US. And by no coincidence, venture capital money was flowing. Why? Because the public markets are where venture capital firms find liquidity. That's where they sell companies, that's where they take them public, and the companies who buy companies, the Googles and the Facebooks who acquire a lot of these companies, their stock is going up too. So everything is cheaper in terms of the relative value of their stock being higher, so everything goes up more, and so more money flows into startups. But that actually creates a sense of inflation within the startup community. You've all read about housing prices here in the Bay Area, and it's $2,500 a month for someone to live in a box, and Google engineers are living in their own vans, and all these kinds of things that are going on. There's a sense of wage inflation, entitlement inflation, perks inflation that goes along. So companies are raising more money, but everything is more expensive to do too, right? There was one prominent Bay Area company that announced last week they were cutting employee perks, not salaries, not benefits, not number of employees, but perks by $38 million a year, right? How many perks do you have to be giving out to be able to cut $38 million in perks, right? It's a pretty big amount of perks that you must be giving out, right? We're in LA, and about the perk we have is that there's a free water dispenser in the co-working space where we work, okay? And that's after $13 million of funding that we've raised, right? So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, is that the public markets and the rise of those markets, the bullish nature of public markets, do affect the ways the venture capital market sector and how they look at companies. But the other thing to keep in mind is that venture capital firms and venture capitalists, whether they're here in Silicon Valley or in Los Angeles or in Boston, are typically, and again, there are great VCs out there, and I don't want to piss anyone off because I still have to raise money. So I say this with a grain of salt, but VCs are rarely investors in revolutions. They're mostly investors in evolutions. They recognize patterns. They look for spaces that are hot. They look for teams that they've worked with. They look for economics they can understand, right? When the first VCs invested in Uber, it was a black car service. It was not, I get in the back of a Prius of a random person, right? It was a black car service. And then Uber did UberX, copying Lyft or Sidecar, however you want to tell that particular story. The point is, Uber became Uber. Travis executed like crazy. They grew the company. And most of the money they've raised since then is investing in the success of what is a pretty well-defined success story, a category-changing company. The revolution Uber made, they made, and VCs invested post-revolution rather than pre-revolution. So, and one of the title of my talk, I think, is, this thing keeps falling off. The title of my talk is, raising money in a post-bubble economy, but keeping in mind how you want to change the world, right? And oftentimes, the investors and the entrepreneurs who want to do the biggest or most dramatic changes sometimes have the hardest time raising money because the incremental change. I have an ad tech to play that does this 5% better than this and cuts cost 8% over this, and I'm previously from an ad tech company, and I have 10 years of ad tech experience, and blah, blah, blah. That's an easier story to understand than I'm doing something you've never heard of before in a space that doesn't exist yet, right? Leah from TaskRabbit was up here, and they created the gig economy before there was a gig economy, before we knew to call it a gig economy. TaskRabbit was a precursor to Postmates and Uber and all of these different services, right? And they've been through as she said, from the good times and the bad times in fundraising. But here's the good news, and this is what I think is important to remember, is that there are more ways to raise money now than ever before, right? 10, 12 years ago, I don't know how many seasons the show's on, there wasn't Shark Tank. People go on to Shark Tank and raise money, right? There wasn't crowdfunding. Now there's Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all these different crowdfunding campaigns. And most recently, starting last year, who here is familiar with Title IV, the SEC Title IV? Okay, very few of you. You should look this up. It's a way for small companies to raise money in the public markets. It's called crowd investing, right? There's a company called Elio Motors that just worked with a platform called Start Engine and raised $17 million in a public offering as a pre-revenue, pre-launch, pre-everything company on a concept, right? That didn't exist a few years ago, right? All of these different mechanisms are out there, and I mention that because the venture capital community might look at something a certain way, but it doesn't mean private investors do. My bio, and I think in the program here says I've raised $47 million in venture capital or investor capital. That's true, except it's now $53 million because we closed $6 million last week for Heal. That's unannounced yet. And the lead investor in that is not a venture capitalist, but actually a very, very renowned, very well-known billionaire, right? And I can't say who because the investment isn't announced yet and we want to make kind of a big deal of it. But the point is I was talking to a VC after that investment closed. I was telling him who it was, and he said, that kind of dumb money, when it's here, and the markets are good, and that kind of dumb money is available, but you have to keep in mind that kind of money can dry up. And I said right back, well, so does VC money, right? It ebbs and flows with the market. So the most important, if you remember nothing else from what I'm saying up here today, remember this. There is not one way to raise money. There are many ways to raise money. The $13 million we've raised for Heal has been almost 100% from private angels, super angels, and very wealthy people who believe in the concept of what we're doing. Whereas when I raised money for FitOrbit, 12 million of that came from traditional venture capital and corporate venture capital firms. And when I raised money for Juice Wireless, it was almost all corporate venture capital firms. And for Ziki, it was all venture capital firms, and angel investors. So the time and the market and your product and your service and the stage of your company and your level of experience dictates which way you might work for you. But if you're not trying all of them, you're not really trying any of them successfully. Because I'm here to tell you that there's no really such thing as the difference between smart money and dumb money, right? I've been into these VC conferences and startup conferences before as an audience member, and people are talking about, well, when you raise VC funding and you have 3 competing term sheets, and how do you negotiate between these term sheets while keeping all the VCs hot to get the best deal for yourself? And I always used to sit there and say to myself, what if you have no term sheets? What if you got a guy holding your deck in your hand, okay, deck, not the other one, holding your deck in your hand and trying to pitch this idea, and you have 2 guys working for free for you, okay, out of your mom's garage, and you have no money and no product and no bupkis. and you're trying to get money, okay? And you don't have enough money to the Southwest flight to fly in to meet the VCs in the first place, right? What if you're that guy? Well, that's where all of us start at some point, I'd like to think. And so you have to try all of the different mechanisms that are out there, whether it's Kickstarter or crowdfunding or crowd investing or Shark Tank or VCs or angels or super angels or corporate. If you're not pitching, you're not trying. Between 1998 and this year, I have raised actually closed investment capital in all but 5 of the years in those 18 years. And that's not to say I'm great. That's to say that I've been a CEO of a startup or different startups. And the point is, you always should be raising money, right? That is your number one job, is to keep the company funded, right? Now, the other thing, which I think Leah said very well, is that you have to fundamentally build something that actually has value. There has to be product market fit. It has to be a great product. You have to have a great team. It doesn't mean a team with track records that knows the right people. It means a team that's relevant to what the heck you're actually doing, right? We're a house call doctor service, so my co-founder is a triple board certified doctor. So she knows medicine. She also happens to be my wife, and I know how to do tech startups, right? So the point is that you have to build something that fundamentally has value. And if you do, there's no such thing as a good market or a bad market. When VCs talk about the bubbles burst and this and that, and valuations are coming down, those things actually don't affect you if you're just starting your startup that much. Because guess what? These bubbles and the down markets and up markets last a couple of years and then things get better. And they last a few years and things get worse. That's a cyclical nature of business. It's a cyclical nature of human beings in the public and private markets that we've seen over the last 100 years. And the point of that is to say that there's no such thing that affects you you don't care if you raise your seed round or your A round at a 5 million or a 7 million pre-money valuation. And if you do, you're stupid. You shouldn't care. Okay? What you should care about is, are you getting enough capital to deliver real milestones, to build a product or service that has real value, that has a real business model, that has real unit economics, that actually work for you and for your investors, so you can keep hitting milestones, so you can keep raising money, right? It's easy to sit here and think about, well, organic growth is the path. The lady from Citrus Lane was talking about that. But organic growth only happens if people actually like your product. Because no one's going to tell their friend, you know, I bought this thing and it's crappy, but it would help out the company if you use it, right? They're going to tell their friends if they organically love their product. 38% of all of our customers come from word of mouth, because people try Heal and their doctor comes to their house and they're so blown away, they tell their friends, my doctor comes to my house now, right? So if you build something that has fundamental, real, transformative value that is different, that consumers want, that isn't a fad, or businesses want, or whoever your audience is, that has a real economic and business model, you'll raise money in the good times and in bad. One of the most interesting things I find is a misperception is when people hear that the VC markets are tougher, or that it's harder to raise money, or valuations are coming down, they somehow think that all of the VC funds have no money left. That's not the case at all. If you read the research on the VC funds just here in the Bay Area, and it's easy to do, you'll find out when they raised their last fund. This company raised a $1 billion fund, and that fund raised a $400 million fund. That money's sitting there, and they're not paid to sit on money, they're paid to invest it, right? And so whether or not and you're lucky if you're in the early starting position. You know where it's tough to be right now? It's tough to be trying to raise your B round. And you raised your A round at a $100 million valuation in the bubble, and you got 25 on 100, but now you need another 25 million, and you spent, and you got the baristas and the perks and the gourmet chefs to come and all the cool things that companies like to do, especially up here in the Bay Area, and you did all that stuff, and now you have to raise your B round, and even though you've had some performance, and even though you've grown a little bit, you haven't blown the doors off the place, and you're going to fight, and now you're having to consider a down round, and your existing investors are upset, and the employee options are underwater, so employees start to leave for the next hot startup. That's the tougher place to be. If you're just starting out now, the fact that there's a bubble or not a bubble, you should not even think about that. Great companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, the Apples, these companies, Intels, are immune from economic cycles because they build something that is fundamentally of value, and they continue to innovate and they continue to deliver on that, right? So I'll close and then I'll open up to questions if there's time by saying 3 things. Number 1, don't be affected by whether there's a bubble or not. Number 2, try every single channel to raise money that is out there, and talk to everyone. And number 3, try every channel Number 2 is try every channel of fundraising. And number 3, build a product, service, or business that is fundamentally has real, lasting value and economics you can believe in. One of the great things about having my wife as a business partner is she asks me once a month, she turns to me. We have 2 little boys at home and a mortgage, and so, she does the worrying for both of us, and she turns to me and she asks me, she says, honey, is this really a business? Is this really a company? Or are we just selling, right? And I tell her, because she's my wife and because we have kids, I would tell you if I stopped believing in it, right? If you don't, oftentimes we get so eager in the pitch and the story and how to tell it and how to convince other people, we forget that we have to convince ourselves, right? If you're not sold on your story, don't go sell it, because getting money is the easy part. Having to call investors and saying, look, I spent your $4 million and nothing came of it, that's a lot tougher phone call to make than, hi, will you give me the money in the first place? So those are the 3 things I have to say. We're Heal, and I will give you this shameless plug because I said build something of fundamental value. Check out getheal.com. Download the app. It's a doctor to your door in 2 hours or less. We accept all PPO insurance. Otherwise, it's $99, 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and I'd love for all of you to check it out. Thank you. I think I have about 2, 3, 4 minutes for questions if there are any. Up here.
This is probably a more general question. So an idea could be great. How do you protect your business from stealing the idea or replicating it? Do you file patents, or what do you do?
So the question was, how do you protect the intellectual property or your idea in your business? And my answer to that is always, you don't. You only protect it by doing, right? I get asked this all the time because I speak at universities a lot to students who want to be entrepreneurs, and they say, well, is this a good idea, or is that how do I know if I have a good idea? And I always say this, there's no such thing as a good idea, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's people who get up in the morning and change the world, and there's people who don't, right? The only way to protect your idea is to do it. Think about this. Uber has changed the world of transportation without any meaningful patent or intellectual property. They've done it by just doing it faster than anyone else could have imagined that they would do it, right? So I wouldn't worry about that nearly as much as I would worry about get my business out there, get my product out there, make my customers love it, and the rest of it will follow. Up here. I'm at DJ No Funk on Twitter, but I do have to leave. And I have 1 minute, so any last questions?
Hi, Nick, you're really awesome. So
thank you.
On the second question about omnichannel, raising money and all, you went through the list really fast. Could you slow down a little bit and throw a few names out there?
Of the different ways to raise money?
Yeah.
So one is obviously the traditional venture capital channel, and you can easily start, if you don't know any VC names in the world, just Google top 25 venture capitalists, top 100 venture capitalists, and then do your homework. Go to their website, see what they invest in, find the right partner. Most of them list their emails on their website. Send them an email, right? Number 2 is the crowdfunding sources, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and the campaigns like that. Number 3 is crowd investing. There's a company called Start Engine. I'm not endorsing any one company, but Howard Marks runs that, and I know that company, and it's a very good company in the space, and they've done great in the crowd investing space. Number 4 is angels and super angels. Who's an angel? Anyone with $10 in their pocket that they'll give to you, okay? The people in this room, hey, I got an idea, will you give me $5? And then the last one, which I sort of forgot to mention, is your customers. The best way to raise money is to not have to by selling something to customers and being profitable as a business. And then, of course, Shark Tank, and just Google the Shark Tank TV show, and you should be able to apply. And I'm amazed at the diversity and variety of entrepreneurs they bring on there and how bad some of the ideas are, and that's a good thing because that means there's a lot of room for ideas, and that's not to say your idea is good or bad. It just means that they'll take a lot of different people out there to pitch. I think I'm out of time, so thank you.